Hi everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. For more than 2 decades, the International Criminal Court has presented itself as one of the most ambitious projects in modern international law. Its mission sounds simple and powerful. No leader, no military commander, and no government should be above justice. But today, that mission is facing one of its biggest challenges. The Trump administration is launching a major campaign against the ICC, threatening sanctions, visa restrictions, diplomatic pressure, and urging American allies to distance themselves from the court. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has gone even further, arguing that the ICC has transformed itself from a court focused on the world's worst crimes into a political institution that threatens American sovereignty. So why is the Trump administration taking such a hard line against an international court designed to prosecute war crimes and crimes against humanity? And is this about protecting American sovereignty or weakening the global justice system? The answer depends on how you view one of the biggest debates in international politics today. Should international institutions have the power to hold powerful countries accountable, or should national sovereignty remain the highest authority? The conflict between Washington and the ICC did not begin with Donald Trump. In fact, the United States has always had a complicated relationship with the court. The ICC was created in 2002 after the adoption of the Rome Statute, with the goal of prosecuting individuals responsible for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Many European countries strongly supported the idea. Their argument was straightforward. History has shown that governments sometimes commit terrible crimes against their own citizens. And when national courts fail, the international community needs another option. The supporters of the ICC often point to examples such as the genocides in Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia. They argue that without international justice, many victims would never receive accountability. But the United States has always been concerned about giving such power to an international court. The Clinton administration signed the Rome Statute in 2000, but the treaty was never approved by the U.S. Senate. The reason was simple. Many American lawmakers worried that an international court could eventually be used against American officials and military personnel. Their concern was not that war crimes should go unpunished. Their concern was who gets to decide what counts as a war crime. A foreign prosecutor? A group of international judges? Or the American legal system and elected government? This debate has existed in Washington for decades. During the George W. Bush administration, the United States formally withdrew its signature from the Rome Statute. Washington also passed legislation known as the American Service Members Protection Act, which critics jokingly called the Hague Invasion Act. The law reflected a deep concern among American policymakers. The United States should never allow its soldiers or government officials to be placed under the authority of an international court that America never joined. The first Trump administration continued this approach. In 2020, the administration imposed sanctions on ICC officials after the court investigated alleged American actions in Afghanistan and also examined Israeli military operations. The Biden administration later reversed those sanctions and adopted a more cooperative approach toward international institutions. But the fundamental disagreement remained. The United States was still not a member of the ICC. So what changed under the second Trump administration? The immediate trigger was the ICC's actions involving Israel. The court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over alleged war crimes related to the Gaza conflict. For many countries and human rights organizations, this was a necessary step. They argued that even democratic governments must be held accountable if civilians suffer. But many American conservatives saw it very differently. They argued that the ICC was crossing a dangerous line. Their question was, how can a court that America never joined claim authority over the leader of a close American ally? And if the ICC can target Israel today, could it target American officials tomorrow? This concern became a central argument of the Trump administration. Secretary of State Marco Rubio argues that the ICC has expanded far beyond its original purpose. According to this view, the court was supposed to focus on extraordinary cases, genocide, mass atrocities, and situations where national justice systems completely fail. But critics say the ICC has gradually moved into political disputes involving powerful democratic nations. They argue that the court has become influenced by international activist groups, European political opinion, and organizations that often criticize American foreign policy. From this perspective, the ICC is not simply enforcing law. It is making political decisions under the language of law. However, supporters of the ICC strongly reject this argument. They say, the problem is not that the court has too much power. The problem is that powerful countries have historically avoided accountability. They argue that sovereignty cannot become a shield for governments accused of serious crimes. Their question is, if international courts cannot investigate powerful countries and their allies, then who will protect victims? Should a government be allowed to investigate itself and simply declare that nothing wrong happened? For ICC supporters, that is exactly why the court exists. This is why the ICC debate is much bigger than one court. It represents two completely different visions of the world. One vision says, the international system should be based on rules that apply to everyone. No country, no matter how powerful, should be above international law. The other vision says, international institutions must respect national sovereignty. A country like the United States, with a constitution, elected leaders, and an independent judicial system, should not be judged by institutions that American citizens never authorized. And this disagreement is not limited to Trump supporters. Many American politicians from both parties have historically been cautious about the ICC. The difference is that Trump is willing to confront the institution directly. But there is another important question. Is the ICC really just a political institution targeting Western countries, or does it represent a necessary system of international accountability? The answer is complicated. The ICC has faced criticism from many directions, including from some of its own supporters. One of the biggest criticisms is that the court has struggled with accusations of selective enforcement. Critics point out that international justice often depends on political realities. The ICC does not have its own army. It cannot arrest leaders by itself. It depends on governments cooperating, and that creates a difficult situation. The court may be able to investigate weaker countries where governments cooperate, but it often struggles when dealing with powerful countries that refuse to recognize its authority. This has created a perception among some critics that international justice is not always applied equally. For example, critics ask, why do some conflicts receive intense international attention while others receive much less? Why are some governments investigated while others seem to avoid serious consequences? These questions have existed for years. Supporters of the ICC respond that international justice is never perfect, but that does not mean it should be abandoned. They argue that the existence of a court creates pressure on governments to behave responsibly. In their view, an imperfect justice system is still better than no justice system at all. This debate also reflects a larger divide between the United States and Europe. For many European countries, international institutions are seen as a way to prevent powerful nations from acting without limits. After 2 world wars, many European leaders concluded that national sovereignty alone was not enough to maintain peace. They believed countries needed international rules, international organizations, and shared institutions. This philosophy influenced the creation of organizations such as the European Union and the ICC. The basic idea was, if nations are connected by common rules, they are less likely to repeat the disasters of the past. But many Americans view the issue differently. The United States has historically been more skeptical of international organizations that could limit its freedom of action. American foreign policy has always contained a tension between two ideas. One idea says America should lead the world by building international institutions. The other says America should avoid surrendering decision-making power to institutions that are not directly accountable to American voters. This tension has existed for decades. Donald Trump did not create this debate, but he has pushed the second viewpoint much further than previous presidents. His America First philosophy argues that American interests, American laws, and American citizens should come before international expectations. This is why the ICC issue fits perfectly into Trump's broader foreign policy approach. The same philosophy appears in other areas: trade agreements, military alliances, international organizations, climate agreements, immigration policies. The central question is always the same: how much power should international institutions have over decisions made inside the United States? Trump's answer is clear: very little. But there are also risks with the Trump administration's approach. Critics argue that weakening international institutions could damage America's own long-term interests. For decades, the United States has benefited from a global system built around American leadership. Organizations such as the United Nations, NATO, and international financial institutions have helped create a world where American influence is extremely powerful. If Washington rejects international institutions completely, some analysts worry that other countries may fill the vacuum. But there is another dimension to this debate that is often overlooked. The ICC has also faced criticism from many countries in the global south. For years, some African and developing nations have argued that international justice has been applied unevenly, with weaker countries facing investigations more often, while major powers and their allies rarely face the same level of scrutiny. Critics say this has created a perception that the global legal system reflects Western political influence rather than truly universal standards. So the challenge for the United States is not simply about defending or weakening the ICC. If Washington steps back from international institutions, countries like China and Russia may attempt to promote alternative systems that are less focused on Western values and more aligned with their own interests. The result could be a more fragmented international order, one divided between competing blocs rather than shared rules. There is also a practical question. If the United States argues that international law matters when dealing with America's rivals, but rejects international courts when they examine America's allies, will other countries view that as a double standard? This is one of the strongest criticisms against Trump's position. America has often promoted a rules-based international order, but opponents argue that rules are meaningful only when they apply equally. However, Trump supporters would respond, the United States already has its own legal system. American soldiers and government officials are not operating without accountability. They are accountable under American courts, military law, and congressional oversight. Therefore, they argue, allowing foreign judges to intervene is unnecessary and dangerous. Their argument is not that crimes should go unpunished. Their argument is that justice should begin with national sovereignty. So the real question is not whether war crimes should be punished. Almost everyone agrees they should. The real question is, who has the authority to judge? Should international courts have the final say? Or should nations remain responsible for enforcing their own laws? This is the fundamental disagreement behind the fight between Washington and the ICC. The Trump administration believes the ICC has crossed a line. From its perspective, a court created without American approval cannot claim authority over American citizens, American officials, or close American allies. That is why the administration is considering stronger measures. More sanctions, visa restrictions, pressure on allied governments, and possibly reducing America's cooperation with countries that recognize ICC authority over Americans. Supporters say this restores an important principle. No international institution should override the sovereignty of the American people. Critics see it differently. They argue that America, as the world's most powerful democracy, should welcome accountability rather than fear it. They believe that international courts are not a threat to sovereignty, but a protection against abuses of power. For them, the ICC represents an idea that human rights are universal, that justice should not depend on geography, and that powerful leaders should not receive special treatment. So where does this leave us? The battle over the International Criminal Court is unlikely to end soon, because the disagreement is not really about one court. It is about the future of the international system itself. After World War II, the United States helped create a world order based on alliances, institutions, and international rules. But today, a growing number of Americans believe that system has gone too far. They believe international organizations have become less accountable and increasingly hostile to national sovereignty. Trump's foreign policy represents the strongest version of that argument. His supporters believe he is defending American independence. His critics believe he is weakening the very system that helped make America powerful. Perhaps the most important question is this: can the world maintain international cooperation without allowing international institutions to become detached from democratic accountability? That is the challenge facing not only the United States, but the entire global system. The ICC debate is really a debate about power. Who controls it? Who limits it? And who has the final authority? For the Trump administration, the answer is clear. The American people, through their own constitutional system. For supporters of the ICC, the answer is different. Some crimes are so serious that the entire world has a responsibility to respond. And that disagreement is not going away. Because behind the fight over one court is a much bigger question. In the 21st century, will the world be governed primarily by nations or by international institutions? That question may define the next generation of global politics. Thanks for watching.